everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on the Acura CL. Specifically, the Acura CL is suffering from a very common problem that most Acuras and Hondas of this era experience at one point or another. And that is power steering pump whine. Power steering pump whine is somewhat common, like I said, within the Acura and Hondas of this era, between probably the early 90s to probably mid-2000s, if you will. And what most people don't really understand about what that is that it's not an actual pump failure in most cases. There could be some pump failure associated with this if you let it prolong, but in most cases, if you catch it early, really what it is a resealing and regasketing of the lines as well as the pump itself. Now, what I've been able to ascertain is that the pump was working just perfectly fine, and it has periods of time when it actually works better than not. So you may be experiencing pump whine more commonly during the colder months or during the initial startup until that pump actually warms up. And that's because the seals have actually gone either between the line and the pump itself or within the pump itself. And what happens is that the air, because it's a pump, is sucking in fluid and air at the same time because that seal or multiple seals have failed. As that air enters that pump, it creates a little dead pocket within the pump, and you get a little bit of a whine because it's not fluid that it's pumping, it's air that it's pumping. More common than not, people choose to just replace the pump because they're not quite sure. And in addition to that, they usually just replace the gaskets that connect to the pump at the same time, and hence your problem is solved. But what I experience is that when I've done this in the past, that it's better to hold on to the OEM pump because of the quality of manufacturing that's associated with an OEM part and just reseal it. It's pretty inexpensive when you buy the gaskets, and they usually come as a kit. For me, I purchased these seals online on eBay through an Acura dealership that was selling this kind of as a bundled deal. I'll insert a clip now so that you can hear what it's like, not on this car specifically, but a very similar situation with another car that I was able to find a clip for. We'll go over the gaskets that you'll need to perform this on the Acura CL, as well as starting to take the car apart. Now, since the car is in storage, I'm not going to start up the car and actually let you hear what it is that we're experiencing, and there won't be an after review of this. The fact of the matter is I want people to understand what we're actually doing here and how to do it themselves if they opt to go this way. Now, there's other problems that could occur that may be separate, so you definitely want to do a little research into what your specific situation is. And some of those specific situations that may lend itself to diagnosing that it's the seals is if you see seeping of fluid either in the lines or out of the pump or something like that. Now, this car actually does have some seeping occurring, so that's a pretty strong indicator that we have a seal. Now, some people will choose to just do the seals at the line fittings because those are more common than not the issue. But I like to just take a whole approach where we actually reseal the whole pump and the lines going to the pump. That way I'm pretty confident that I've narrowed it down to, or I've covered my bases, so to speak, and it's just general good maintenance to do this every so often on an older car. So I'll show you the gaskets. I have them all laid out here, and you can see the part numbers that you'll need. Obviously do your research on your specific vehicle and application so that you get the right gaskets. But let's go ahead and get started on that. Okay, so here we have our gaskets for what we'll be doing today. A couple gaskets here for the lines, a couple gaskets here for the actual pump itself. And we have a new top for the fluid reservoir. And here's a couple more lines, line fitting gaskets. So you'll want to definitely have the line gaskets. And so here's the here's the line number for what is one of the lines going in. So you have two lines, one on the bottom side of the pump and one on the top side of the pump. So that's your first one. And then this is your second one. And you'll have a couple part numbers here for your pump. And Now, like I mentioned, I bought these all as a kit from an online source, but it was a dealership source that was supplying them, so these are all genuine Honda parts. Now, I have a couple duplicates here just because I want to be able to have extra on hand if need be. Yeah, and I have a top here. This top, sometimes these fins break and they don't create a good seal, so it's pretty good just to replace this inexpensive part, so why not go ahead and rule that out as well. So those are the gaskets that you'll need, so you can really see that there's not a lot of work here, so to speak. So we're going to try to see how long this takes. Obviously I'm filming here, but in total it shouldn't take too long to go ahead and do this. We're really just going to remove a bunch of engine cover parts, pull the pump out, disconnect some lines, that type of thing. The other thing is that you may opt to replace the rubber line that goes from the reservoir to the actual connection of the pump. It's a low pressure line. It's just basically a fluid tube. I don't have that here, it's coming in the mail, so we'll go ahead and do that at a later point. Alright, so as you can see here, we got our power steering pump off on the left, and we have two lines coming into this pump. We have one here, which is your high pressure line, and we have that low pressure line going to the reservoir. We also have a belt that we're going to have to navigate, as well as some removal of some engine covers, so no big deal. The first place that you might want to start is actually with the lines going in and draining some of the fluid that will come out of that. Now, obviously this pump has been primed with the fluid, so it's definitely going to create some mess. All in all, though, this isn't a very complicated job. I would say that somebody with basic hand tool experience could simply pull this apart and replace the gaskets without too much difficulty. We do have an OEM belt here, so it's definitely good to inspect that OEM belt to make sure that it is wearing correctly, as well as not showing any signs of deterioration. If it is, we'll go ahead and replace that. I do have a spare on hand. I always keep a spare accessory belt on hand because those are the belts that will stop you dead from driving your car. So always best to have a couple of those on hand. All in all, though, this is very accessible, and so you shouldn't have really any problem. Let's go ahead and get started on this job by removing the cover. I'm not sure if it picks up on video, but we can tell that we have some oil that has leaked out of at least the line gasket here and likely the line gasket here. So that means that it's a pretty strong indicator that the line gaskets are really what the issue is here. However, I also see that there could be possible signs that the pump itself over here on this seal is starting to leak. And so we just really don't know. And in the cases where you just can't definitively tell, it's best just to go ahead and replace all those gaskets at once. So we have a couple tensioner bolts that we need to back out so that we can slip the belt off here. Usually I leave the lines for last just because it's a little bit easier to go ahead and remove the belt first and then the lines. So what we'll need is looks like maybe a 12 on that deep, and I know there's another one underneath as well as on the back side here. So let's see if that's a 12. Yep, so this is a 12 for your tensioner bolt. It looks like likely we have a 12 on the other tensioner bolt as well. Since we're removing this pump completely, let's just go ahead and back these out all the way. There's no sense in just two major ones done, and now we've got to figure out how we get down into the bottom side of the pump where the last tensioner bolt resides. And this last tensioner bolt is basically flying blind in there. So if you imagine a triangle, you've got one here, one on the back side, but you also have one on the bottom side. And that one on the bottom side is a little tricky to get to, I'll say that. You can kind of see it if you peep down between the belt and the actual hose bracket there. But it's very, very difficult to actually get a clear line of sight on there. So I am on it now. There we go. Now you can see that the pump's actually moving within the bracket itself. So we've been successful in so far getting access to all of these with just a 12mm deep socket. And the reason why I'm using a deep socket is because on the first bolt, or it's actually a nut, not a bolt. There's two bolts, one nut, and that one nut is on a threaded end, and so you have to use a deep socket on that. But it actually works quite conveniently that you're using one tool for all the attachment points. Now I am finding it a little difficult with this AC line here to actually gain access to this back one in a way that makes it easy to pull out. I could use my air tools, but I really wanted to show everybody that you can do this with basic hand tools. You just may have to take a little bit longer to do it. I'm just doing really small clicks. At this point, we could remove the belt. That might give us a little bit more room. We've got enough slack on this that the belt should start to slide off now. So now we have the belt. We'll tuck the belt off to the side here just because it's not exactly in the way, but it's definitely tucked away and out of the way. Back bolt. What we also do is take our nut from our other threaded end and we'll thread that in. That way we'll use that right there. So now we have just really one bolt, if you will, holding this together. So that's the trick right there. We want to be able to pull that nut off. So now your pump's basically just free within the space. And we're going to disconnect the line. There's two pins on the top. This is where you might want to put a rag down, which is what I'm going to do. don't want to mess up your gasket surface. So we just got a little bit of a stuck gasket remaining surface between. Okay, there we go. So we got some fluid leaking out here. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. So there's our first gasket right here. Our first gasket is the gasket that goes into the top of the pump. Fluid. Tuck this up a little bit. And that gasket has definitely not withstood the elements that it was placed under. So if we look at this gasket, we can see that it's definitely got some marring. Let's see if we stretch it. No, it doesn't have any cracks, but you can definitely see that the fraying, so to speak, on that end could lend itself to some leaking. So we'll put that off to the side, or we'll put that over on the bench for now. So now our next line that we have to remove to get the pump out is the low pressure side. Pretty simple, as you can see. Pliers. And now we just want to pop this off. And now you're at the point where the pump should be free. We'll just loosen the line there. Now you got some fluid that's going to want to leak out, so just be mindful of that. And now we can take this to the bench. Okay, so we've got our pump here. This is on my chemical bench. It's basically my plastic workbench, but you have all this fluid that's going to leak out, so that's why it's over here. I always start with cleaning the outside, so you don't want to contaminate on the inside. So let's go ahead and spray this down. Take our soft bristle brush here, kind of agitate the surrounding area to get any debris off that might be there, or take some old oil like that. So that is a pretty good sign that we've got a hose leaking too. So we've got that hose on order, that'll come in. We'll replace that. We got some definite buildup there, so that's a pretty strong indicator that we've got a leak either at the hose or at the fitting here. Go ahead and replace the gasket there. Okay, so we've got this pretty cleaned up, I'd say. Got a couple areas here we need to work on a little bit. For the most part, it's looking pretty good. So now we've got to take this part off. and replace the gasket that goes on the back side here. As you can see, it's not very complicated, so we'll go ahead and get the wrench. Yeah, so we've just got 12mm bolts on the back side of this. I went ahead and loosened them up. I would suggest putting this in a vise if you have that capacity. This is going to make this a lot easier. So now we're actually going to take the pump assembly apart. And here's one gasket right here. And then there's another gasket inside. So you can see that there's really not much failure components in here. That gasket is definitely done. The gasket itself is very hard. It should be very pliable, and this one feels very, very stiff. So that's not a good sign. We also have to get this gasket out. So to get this gasket out, you're going to want to use a pick or a very fine screwdriver to pull that out without hurting the surface. So there's another very cooked, I would say, gasket. Very compact. They usually don't look flat like this. They're usually not that stiff. So let's talk about the gaskets that we're going to be using here. And this gasket, part number 91348-P2A-003. This is the one that's going to go inside the pump. That's a circular one. So let's go ahead and break that open real quick. We'll set that inside there. There is still fluid there. I like to coat it a little bit with the fluid from the pump. Okay, and then the next gasket is going to be 91349-R70-P01. Put that over there. We'll set that gasket in. And that gasket looks a lot better than the old one. Okay, so we brought our pump over to the bench, and what we did here is we removed the back-facing component of the pump. We replaced the gasket that goes inside here, and we also replaced the gasket that goes inside of this like bolt or nut, if you will. And we've got that going right there. We also need to replace the O-ring that's inside here. So we'll find the appropriate O-ring for that. O-ring goes inside here, just like this. You want to make sure that all your O-rings have a nice amount of power steering fluid on them, and it helps them seal a little bit better. And so now, these two gaskets have been mated and have been inserted, so now we can go ahead and replace this. There's really not a particular way to screw this up because it's at this top right here, so we're just going to insert it in, find the engagement point with the spline drive on the other side. There we go. Go ahead and reinsert our bolts now. Yeah. These are 12 millimeters on the back side. They are 14 foot-pounds of torque. This is 36 foot-pounds of torque. And this is a 10 Allen wrench to get this one off. Now that we've got the power steering pump ready to reinstall, we want to take a look at our lines real quick and see if they need to be replaced. This one is the high pressure line and does have a corresponding gasket that will need to be installed. You want to make sure that you apply a little bit of transmission, but power steering fluid to this gasket, which I'll have plenty of because it'll get everywhere. So I'll go ahead and get the gasket and then install it. Now we have our gasket installed, we can go ahead and replace the power steering pump back into its original location. Now if you remember, we've got two on the bottom and one on the top. We've got our belt reinstalled, we've got our bolts pretty much locked in. We've got a couple more we've got to work on here just to get this tidied up, but for the most part, that's the completion of this project. What we have to do now is basically reprime the pump because we lost all the fluid out of it, and I would advise replacing your fluid at the same time. While you're in here, let's go ahead and bring that out. And our last little task here is to put put the steam cap on. Go. And that's how you perform a reseal on your Honda or Acura running a J-series engine from about mid-1990s to about mid-2000s. This may apply to any model running a J-series, but more specifically the Acura TL and Acura CL models. This process right here is almost complete. Our next step is that we have to drain the power steering fluid, replace the power steering fluid, ensuring that we use Acura or Honda power steering fluid specifically for this application, and bleeding the air out of the system. Bleeding the air out of the system is as simple as starting the engine and turning the wheel from lock to opposite lock a couple of times until the pump whine goes away. Now when you start the engine, you may notice that the pump is still whining. That is because there's a significant amount of air still in the system that needs to be bled out. After taking it for a drive and ensuring that there's no safety issues there, the air should be bled out of the system and the whine should go away. If for some reason that the whine still persists, you may have a deeper issue, or you may have a gasket issue from reassembly. Take a look at the gaskets first, because it may have been a simple tearing of the gasket, or maybe you didn't lubricate a gasket properly before installation. If any of those simple issues arise, replace the gasket. If it's a deeper issue and this didn't actually solve it, you may have a hole or a line issue somewhere in the system. Another common area where you'll find that the air is getting in is on the high pressure line. There's a seal and a crimp between the rubber hose and the end metal fitting. If for some reason that there's a bit of seepage within that line, you could be drawing in additional air into the system. In that case, you want to replace that line and bleed the system and replace the fluid again. If that is still not the resolution for your situation, then you may want to investigate buying a whole new pump assembly, or looking for issues elsewhere within the system. All in all though, this is a fairly simple process if you just replace the seals, and I would say that it takes approximately about 1 hour in total time. Replacing the drive belt is also probably advised, since you're in there anyways and the belt has to come off and on. Thanks for watching. If you have any comments for me, please leave them below. Happy to correspond with you.